Behind me lies the medieval fortified French town of Le Quesnoy that will always have a special bond with New Zealand. Here, a century ago, after 4 long years, the courageous New Zealand soldiers finally had their moment of glory, just 7 days before the Great War came to a close. For most of my life, I've had great affection for New Zealand, its country, its people, and its military history. As someone with many friends in New Zealand and as a champion of bravery, I have long wanted to investigate the dramatic events at Le Quesnoy on November the 4th, 1918, but I've never had the opportunity until now. After Britain declared war on Germany early in August 1914, New Zealand answered the call to arms despite its isolation and small population. More than 100,000 New Zealanders served overseas during the Great War. Quite a contribution, especially when you consider that the population of New Zealand at that time was little more than 1 million. The horrors of the Gallipoli campaign have been well documented. Later, New Zealand forces played a full part in many of the major battles on the Western Front, including the battles of the Somme and Passchendaele. By the late autumn of 1918, the pendulum was finally swinging firmly in favor of the Allies. Early on the morning of November the 4th, the advancing New Zealand division began its assault of the heavily fortified town of Le Quesnoy, which had been in the hands of the enemy since the earliest days of the war. The enemy, which had more than 1,500 troops garrisoned in the town, was determined to hold it at all costs. A major artillery assault was ruled out because many of the town's 5,000 civilian inhabitants were still within its walls. Instead, the aim was to attack the town from the north and the south under the cover of a smoke screen from oil mortars. By 10 a.m., the town was surrounded, but the New Zealanders could not break into the garrisoned town. Offers to surrender were rejected. Reconnaissance of the German defenses continued in an attempt to break the deadlock. Initially, the red brick ramparts looked impregnable, but on closer examination, an observant young second lieutenant, Leslie Averill, aged 21, spotted an unmanned section where a 30-foot ladder would just be able to reach the top. At around 4 p.m., with great apprehension, Averill was the first up the ladder, but even with covering fire, his chances of success seemed slim as he ascended. Averill of the New Zealand Rifle Brigade later described his action, saying there was a narrow stone bridge about 1 foot wide, which spanned the moat and was connected to a sluice gate. A narrow ledge ran for some 10 yards beside the wall. It was only on this narrow wall above the sluice gate that the ladder could reach the top. After reaching the top of the ladder, Averill looked over the bank in front of him and could see that 2 German soldiers were fleeing. He fired at them with his revolver as they scurried off. Soon hundreds of New Zealand soldiers were pouring into the town. Recognizing the hopelessness of his position, the German commander quickly surrendered. In Averill's own words, the Germans threw up the sponge. After being under the heel of the Hun for 4 years, the delight of the people of Le Quesnoy at being free again knew no bounds. In the fighting that day in and around Le Quesnoy, 122 New Zealanders were killed and 375 wounded. Remarkably, there was not a single civilian casualty. 43 Germans were killed and 255 wounded. More than 2,000 Germans from in and around the town were captured, along with 60 guns. New Zealand's last major action of the 1914-18 war had also been its most successful. On the wall behind me is a white stone memorial depicting soldiers clutching their rifles and revolvers, climbing Averill's ladder to scale the ramparts. The dedication reads, "In honor of the men of New Zealand, through whose valor the town of Le Quesnoy was restored to France. It is a simple memorial to a remarkable event, one in which lives were lost but freedoms were gained. Another inscription nearby reads, "From the uttermost ends of the earth." The Commonwealth War Graves Commission Cemetery on the edge of Le Quesnoy is where many of those who fell in the liberation of the town are buried. In total, 16,697 New Zealanders were killed and more than 41,000 were wounded during the Great War, a staggeringly high 58% casualty rate. Furthermore, around 1,000 men died within 5 years of the end of the war as a result of injuries sustained during the conflict. Since 1999, Le Quesnoy has been twinned with the New Zealand town of Cambridge on North Island, reflecting the affectionate bond between France and New Zealand that will never be broken. On November the 4th this year, the centenary of the liberation of the town, I will pause to recall the courage of New Zealanders who gave their lives here in Le Quesnoy. I will remember them.